Hello and welcome to Console Shock Retro and Modern Gaming Chat with me, Trev.
And me, Stu. Hey guys.
We're sounding a bit different today, aren't we?
Yeah, we're huddled around Trev's pink MacBook.
It's rose gold.
It's
actually.
pink. It's pink.
Not there's anything wrong with pink.
It's pink.
It's rose gold.
It's a nice pink though. It's a nice pink.
Well, it's because it's rose gold, which is fundamentally not pink. But yeah,
fair enough.
What's your problem with pink anyway?
No, I like pink.
Oh, you do? You like the pink?
I was wearing pink on Saturday.
What about the brown? Do you like that?
No, not brown.
No.
Always go for the pink. Stay in the safe.
So, well, we think this will sound okay, but the trouble is, YouTube have stopped doing. Well, so how do we do it before, Stu? What was the way we used to do it?
Well, before, you used to send me a link on Google Hangouts, and that would, and we'll record it for about an hour and a half, get some guests in, and it all really, we had it hopefully working very well. Now, YouTube, in their infinite wisdom, have solved some problems which they didn't ever have. And so basically now we can't do what we were doing before. So we now have sort of come up with this other solution, which ideally probably won't work too much in the future, and we'll try and work out a better way, and we'll appreciate your feedback.
If we had guests, this would be impossible, really.
Well, it'll work well if the guest was quite small
and next to us.
And sitting between myself and Trev as we are now. But
like Maximum Power Up, I'm sure he would have been very happy to come down from up north just to sit with us in a room for an hour.
Exactly.
That's what we'd have to have done if this happened a week later. Yeah, they shut down Google Hangouts on air on the 1st of August, and their suggested alternative is Google Webcam or something, or YouTube Cam. But that's just for someone to sit in front of their webcam on their own, directly streaming to their YouTube channel. But that's not really any good if you want to call in guests, or kind of like in a Skype way we were doing before.
So actually, maybe if anyone's got any other podcasters out there have got ideas on how to do this, have come up with the same problem as us, how they do it, please give us some feedback. So any sort of ideas we'll much appreciate.
We can't be the only ones who've got this issue, right?
No.
Tons of people must have been using.
I think I'm going to have to message Joe Rogan.
Really? He knows how to do this.
I'm going to have to
message
H3 Productions, give them a call. I'm waiting for the BBC.
They would know a lot about this sort of thing.
Exactly.
But we do have a topic.
We do.
If you can hear us. So what we're going to talk about, Stu?
We're going to talk about portable gaming. Portable
video games. But before we do, what have you been playing this week or recently?
For last week, I'd say mostly I'm playing Binary Domain on the Xbox 360.
Non-binary domains.
Yeah, well, that's the sequel. And that is, I played probably about half an hour of it, and then someone put on Facebook, Binary Domain, that's such a great game. And I said, no, it's rubbish. All you do is, I think you start with green baddies. They're all the same baddie, but they're green. And then you get a little bit further in, and then you find red baddies. They're the same models, but they're red. And now I'm up to the black baddies. So they're tougher than the red ones, and also tougher than the green ones. So it feels almost like a sort of a budget Game of Thrones, Gears of War. So that's a little bit frustrating. And I've actually gone back to also playing FIFA 2018 on my Switch.
As opposed to sort of Call of Duty, where the bad guys tend to all be brown.
All brown and grey.
Yeah. Those evil brown people that Americans like to shoot. I think it's the vibe they're going for, isn't it? Maybe they should do that with this red, different colours, red, green, and all that.
Well, I think
neutral.
Maybe it's that time that makes it easier. I'm sure it'll mix it up a little bit further down the line.
How's FIFA?
Well, FIFA's good. I seem to be a lot better at it in portable mode.
Yeah?
Than on the big TV.
Why is that?
I don't know.
Your face is nearer the screen.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, though, because that's a portable device, isn't it?
Exactly.
Kind of an evolution on what we're going to be talking about today. So I've mainly been playing old SEGA stuff.
That's lately. Not like you, Trev.
I know.
That's not like you.
Very very outlandish of me to do that. I've actually really started to play a lot of Master System literally in the last couple of weeks. So I managed to get a hold of a Master System 1, which is the better model because it's the one that lets you do SCART, really nice clear video signal with the RGB that you can get out of that, which you can't get out of the 2. So I've been playing that. I haven't got an EverDrive or anything for it yet, so I've literally just been getting my sort of bundle of cartridges that I have. And I've just been playing that, really.
What games have you been playing?
Wonderboy. All the Wonderboys. They're really good.
Yeah.
Not so much the first one. The first one I think is a bit crap.
That's just a straight platformer, isn't it?
Yeah. Like an auto-scrolling weird platform. It's more like a shmup in a weird way.
Because what's it? Dragon's or Monster? What's the Dragon's Trap?
There's the Dragon's Trap, yeah.
Dragon's Trap, Wonderboy in Monster World or something.
There's Monsterland. It's weird. There's Wonderboy, which is the one where you're like just running around chucking axes.
You're on a skateboard.
And it's when you're on a skateboard, yeah. And then there's Wonderboy in Monsterland, which is actually the sequel to that. But that's more like an action RPG platformer.
It's a bit like a Castle Metroidvania game, isn't it?
It is a little bit, but it's more RPG than that. And then there's 2 Wonderboy 3s to make it even more confusing. There's Monster Lair and there's Dragon's Trap. So Dragon's Trap is probably about the most popular Wonderboy game, which is again another sort of action platformer RPG. Really good, probably is the best one. And then you had Monster Lair that come out around the same time, which is just basically a shmup. It's just a shooter. There's no real like RPG element to it at all. It's all right, but it's pretty boring. And then you've got Monster World, which was I think the last one. Actually, no, in Japan they had one more, I think, but for us it was the last one. Wonderboy Monster World, and that's basically very similar to. In fact, it's nearly identical to Dragon's Trap, and a sort of platformer RPG thing. And that came out. That was the one that came out on the Mega Drive, Monster World. But it actually came out on the Master System as well a couple of years later, which is really weird. So yeah, but 3 is really good, and it's great on the Master System. It came out on the Game Gear as well. Talking of handhelds, like a couple of years after the Master System, and it's on the Turbo graphics as well, under a completely different name, called Dragon's Curse.
What was it? The Wonderboy games were called Adventure Island? Or, on the Nintendo.
Because like Hudson bought the rights to the game, kind of, but not the characters or something. So they kind of just sort of adapted them using the same sort of style of game, but they kind of adapted it so it didn't use any of the Wonderboy references, but the game was identical.
I actually want to get it on the Switch, because I think it's one of those games, there's a button you can press, so you go back into sort of Master System mode, and then hit the button again, and you go back into 64-bit Super mode. It's
there's Dragon's Trap, isn't it? Come out on the Switch. Is it on everything? Isn't it? PS4 and all that. It's like a full-on remake.
I'm feeling it's not on the Xbox, but I think it's definitely on the PS4 and definitely on definitely on the Switch.
Yeah, I want to get that, but the original was really good on the Master System. What are your thoughts on the Master System, Stu, generally?
Well, I like it. I'm always a big fan of it. I'm actually want to get myself one of those power-based converters.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's basically,
come on, these people need to know.
I'm sure they know. Basically, so you can play Master System games on your Mega Drive. But something that used to be, £5 now costs, I don't know, maybe sort of £40 or £50. And if you want to get the Master System 2 one, that's maybe £80, £90, £100. But I think there are adapters that come out to be used with the clone consoles. So you can, and those adapters are maybe sort of $14.99.
There is one that's like a company has made called the PowerBase Mini, which is basically like the PowerBase Converter 2, which is much smaller than the original, wasn't it? Because it was meant for a Mega Drive 2, but it works on the Mega Drive 1 as well. But tiny, they made hardly any of those compared to the original one. I don't think you can use cards on it either. I think it's just the cartridges. But I
mean, it's not really a loss. A lot of the card games also came out on cartridge anyway.
It's just the 3D glasses that you might miss out on. But how much of a loss is that, really?
Exactly.
But yeah, you get these things called power-based mini cartridges. I think places like Retro Towers sells them, and some of the other retro sort of game places. and it's just the size of a Mega Drive cartridge, and you plonk the Master System cartridge on top of that. It's got a little port connector, kind of like Sonic and Knuckles, and you can use that to play Master System games, and they're like 30 quid.
Yeah.
So it's probably the way you want to go, really. But you can
Certainly
also
the
play...
best value way to do it.
Yeah, because what's a power-based converter these days? Yeah, like 50 quid, isn't it, or something?
It's a lot.
You couldn't give them away 10 years ago.
No, you just saw piles of them.
Yeah, it's cheaper to get a Master System, which is less convenient, I guess, but...
We're talking about my Master System. I've actually got mine. I've got Master System 2 and I've got it modded for RGB out.
Why did you have to do that, though? Surely it does RGB, right?
Well, it didn't. You said earlier it didn't.
Yeah, well, they didn't know. No, I didn't know that. Yeah. Listening.
I think you did anyway.
Stop telling them our secrets that we talk before we do this thing.
Of course we talked before.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I've got mine modded to play... Well, to output RGB, and it's obviously it looks a lot better.
Because they just do RF, don't they? The Master System 2.
Yeah, it's a really basic,
not even composite.
Really basic machine.
Yeah. So did you buy that pre-modded, or did you have to get someone to do it?
No, a friend of mine, Alistair, did it.
Oh, cool. So that's the thing with I got the Master System I got recently. I've had a 2 for ages, since the 90s. But obviously, it only has RF. But I really like the original. I like that sort of stupidly futuristic kind of brick thing that the Master System 1 was, and it does RGB, so you don't have to mod it or anything, which is kind of cool for a console from the 80s to have RGB built in. I can't really think of another one that does that. The PC Engine doesn't. Well, I guess the Mega Drive, which is 1989. That's the only other one. But the Master System was probably the first, not counting the computers. The home computers like the Amiga and the Atari ST.
The GX4000 that had RGB out.
Are you actually being serious?
It did, yeah. A great big
it wouldn't surprise me, actually.
Socket on the back.
Because the home computers tended to do it, didn't they? Not the Amiga and the Atari, not because everyone had SCART, because the monitors that they made for them were RGB.
Exactly.
I've been playing that a lot, and like I said, I've mentioned it before, but I was more of a NES person in the early bit of the 90s. I didn't really play Master System. My first Sega console was the Game Gear. So I'm finding it quite cool. And I want to get a Master EverDrive. Because one of the great things about that now, talking about handhelds, a lot of people have converted some of the Game Gear exclusive titles that never had a Master System version. They've actually converted them to run on a Master System now. Probably people are thinking, why would that be awkward in the first place? Aren't they very similar hardware-wise? Well, they are, but the Game Gear has a larger colour palette. The Game Gear has like 4,096 colours or something.
It's got a smaller screen though, isn't it?
It's got a smaller resolution, yeah. But the Master System can only do 64 colours. So they've had to sort of go in and hack the Game Gear ROMs to kind of use the palette of the Master System. And sometimes they're able to sort of hack them so they can use the full width of the screen and get a small little postage stamp in the middle of the screen, which is the actual Game Gear resolution. But that's great because it means that I think most of the exclusives, if you go onto a website, smspower.org, if you go on there's an entire list of all the Game Gear games that have been converted by the community. And I think it's pretty much all the exclusives where there was not a Master System version, because there was quite a bit of a crossover, wasn't there, between the Game Gear and the Master System. Yeah,
most games, I'd say a lot of games came out on both, didn't they? But then I think later on there was quite a few like Sonic games that came out on the Game Gear, like Sonic Drift 1 and 2.
Triple Trouble and Probably because when you got to about 94, I think the Master System really started to drop off, didn't it?
Exactly.
So basically most of the Game Gear games from that point in time to when the Game Gear kind of finished, they've managed to, and the odd ones like Shinobi on the Game Gear is its own unique game. They've converted that, Fatal Fury Special and all those kind of cool, quirky sort of games. They all work on the Master System, but obviously the best way to do that is if you get the ROMs for these, get a Master EverDrive, you can use that on a real Master System. And I've done things like they've mapped, obviously the Master System didn't have a start button on the control pad, which is also a really awkward thing. They've mapped like start on what would have been on the Game Gear to like button 1 or something. So you can get past the title screen. And pause, they've managed to get it to work with the pause button on the unit, which is all still annoying because that's the thing about the Master System is the pause button is on the console. You have to get up and press the button on it to pause your bloody game. But they've also got some of the games are actually can detect if you're using a Mega Drive controller, which is compatible with the Master System. So if you hit start on the controller, a Mega Drive controller, it will actually detect it and it will pause the game, which is really cool. So that's added an extra, I don't know, probably about another 100 games onto the Master System's library, which is already, nearly 400 games, I think. And you've got those quirky Brazilian titles, which are probably way too expensive, where they sort of took it upon themselves.
I've seen some Brazilian titles.
Have you really? What are they?
I can't remember the name.
The
of
World
them
Cup or
yeah,
there was
World Cup football.
There was they basically took a lot of Game Gear games and they converted them, but officially, not like in a bootleg way. They kind of had an official Sega license, Tectoy.
Tectoy,
Yeah, in Brazil, who looked after the Master System in Brazil. I think Earthworm Jim and FIFA and things like that actually were actual releases for the Master System in Brazil. We didn't get those here. Yeah, you could get a Mortal Kombat 3.
So I think I was listening to, on the Retro Hour, they had the guy who ran Tectoy in like the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
And that was a cracking episode, so I recommend listening to that as well. And that was sort of really good hearing all about sort of the history of Tectoy and how things were different in Brazil and so on.
Yeah, it was kind of a bizarro world where Sega were popular in the UK. I think they were number one, to be honest, in consoles until they died, really. Well, until the PlayStation. But yeah, it's crazy when you think about how the Master System is still getting released in like Brazil, isn't it? They're still making Master System consoles that are official Sega licensed consoles.
It goes off topic, but a little bit. But I had a friend from Brazil, and he was saying that if you wanted to buy a PlayStation 4, there'll be £300 here, but with all the import taxes and things like that in Brazil, they'll be sort of near on £1,000.
Yeah.
And of course, in Brazil, they don't quite earn the same money as they do over here. So it was almost like, no one ever had like PlayStation 4s, PlayStation 3s, Xbox 360s when they initially came out, or very few people did.
Exactly. So the Master System never really had something that people migrated to because the newer systems were too expensive.
Or they had to be made in Brazil to avoid these taxes.
Yeah.
But of course,
Tectoy actually were able to make them. Sega sort of helped them out with that, didn't they? Very, very clever of Sega to do that. But yeah, so that kind of brings us to, we've already touched upon the Game Gear a little bit. So handhelds.
Handhelds, yeah.
So what would be your first experience of a handheld console?
Console, okay.
Yeah.
So before the consoles, obviously I played the Game & Watches, those little knockoff games from Hong Kong, those Tiger things, but we're not really talking about those because they're, to me, they weren't that great. Maybe the Game & Watches, what they were, but my initial memory of portable gaming was with the Game Boy, and I remember getting one of those for Christmas, or maybe for my birthday, and it was such a big deal because I took it to school every day. I had Tetris for it, and I think I had Tetris and Mario Land. They were the sort of the two games, but it was just perfect, and I absolutely loved it, and played it all night long. Absolutely perfect machine. So, what's your memory? I'm sure
it's a Game Boy as well.
Yeah.
I remember a friend of mine had one. This must have been about 1990 or 1991. It came out over in the UK in 1990. And the thing about the Game Boy is a lot of people don't realise that was the first popular Nintendo console. Everything thought it was a Super Nintendo. No, that was like 2 years later for us. The Game Boy was the first popular Nintendo console in the UK. And a mate of mine got one, and I just thought it was awesome. It was just like playing games that, over here we would have had on the popular console then was probably the Master System, I think. And then we had the NES here, but hardly anybody had a NES. It was all about the Master System.
For me, it was at home. At the same time, I played the Spectrum.
Yeah.
And my next route there was I wanted to get a Spectrum. Next, I wanted to get an Amiga.
Yeah.
But then portable gaming, that was where the Game Boy was king. Nintendo was king, and it was you're right, only a few people I knew. Only one person comes to mind who actually had a Nintendo. A few more people had Master Systems, but it was where it came to sort of top, sort of console type gaming. It would have been the Game Boy.
Yeah, and I think it's a different class of system, isn't it, to a regular console or computer? Because often they're a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
The games you got were kind of a lot of the time, not so much, or definitely not these days, but mostly it was you were paying for a device that was basically the generation before the sort of current one in terms of the big consoles. So you kind of got baby versions of games a lot of the time. But that didn't really matter in those days because, the top tier systems were 16-bit computers and consoles, and for the most part, a good, powerful 8-bit console could keep up mostly with those sort of games, 16-bit games.
On such a small screen, and you see things like Zelda, I would say Link's Awakening. Link's Awakening,
yeah.
The wrong one there.
Super Mario Land.
Mario Land 2.
Yeah.
Especially, that looked just as good as Super Mario World.
Exactly.
Obviously, a small screen. Obviously, not as much colours. But it had almost as much sort of depth to it. And things like sort of DuckTales comes to mind.
Well, you got Contra. There was a really good, it was called Operation C. Or it's just called Probotector over here, but that's a really good Game Boy version. There's a really good Castlevania. There's 3 Castlevanias on the original Game Boy. They're all
first
quite
one
good.
Was rubbish.
I really like it.
No, it was
Everyone
so
hates
slow.
it. It's very slow, yeah, but I quite like it.
I'll tell you a funny story about
The
that.
Adventure it's called, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, Castlevania Adventure, yeah. We had someone in our school from Hong Kong, which family were from Hong Kong, and he brought a Game Boy over from Hong Kong and had about sort of 7 games with it. And he had one where it was this guy walking along with a whip, but on the front of it, and it was all in Chinese or Japanese and things. So we always called it Whiplash.
It's a good name for a game, though.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. We play that game.
Whiplash. Play Whiplash, coming out next month
but,
on Game Boy.
It was the original Castlevania.
Yeah.
And no one actually worked out what it was until maybe a year later when someone got the UK version of it, or I don't know, we somehow worked out exactly what it was. But we always called it Whiplash for the first year.
I think it come out quite early in the Game Boy.
Oh,
it
yeah,
was about a month after. I'm sure it was a launch game, and I think it was, but I think it came out about a month afterwards. But I quite like it. I mean, I like Castlevania a lot, so I'm kind of more partial to it than your average person. But it's actually quite good. Also, but the sequel is a lot better. Belmont's Revenge, and you got Castlevania Legends, which everybody hates as well. I think is all right. So yeah. But yes, you got great. I mean, in those days, like the early to mid '90s, the platforming game was the first-person shooter of its time, and the Game Boy could do those pretty well.
Exactly, and it was. I'm trying to think about what processor it had.
It was a weird one. It wasn't like a Z80 or a 6502, which are the main ones, wasn't it? It was like I can't remember what it was called, but it was like a hybrid of like a Z80 and like an Intel 8086, which is kind of weird. There's a great video called The Ultimate Game Boy Talk, where it's some kind of hackers convention or retro gaming convention. This guy does this amazing presentation on how they programmed the Game Boy and like the hardware and everything. But yeah, so it wasn't. It probably wasn't easy to port a NES game to the Game Boy because it wasn't the same processor. But yeah, I mean, the first Kirby game was on the Game Boy as well, Kirby's Dream Land. Well, it's kind of a bit weird playing that now because you don't inhale your enemies and steal their powers, which is actually really, really distracting the first time you play it, if you haven't played that before.
I haven't played it, I'll have to go back to that
Yeah,
one.
It was the game, it was the NES, well, the Kirby's Adventure on NES is kind of a weird remake and sequel in one. Which is it's a really good game, by the way, Kirby's Adventure on NES. It's my favourite NES game. But yeah, so that started on there as well. And you got some great ports of just, I remember like playing, actually looking back, it's terrible. I used to love playing Mortal Kombat on it, even though that was the worst version ever. Yeah. I was like 10 when that came out, so that was the only way I could really get it, because I had a Game Boy. So for me, it was amazing. Although 2 is actually very good on the Game Boy.
They had a Street Fighter 2 as well, didn't they, on there?
Yeah, it's really crap though.
Yeah,
it's all right.
It's not all right.
It's not as. I'd probably say the Amiga version of Street Fighter 2 is slightly better, and that's pretty terrible.
It should be better, but
yeah. It's not a good. I don't think 8-bit consoles were great for one-on-one fights. There's a few exceptions. There's a few handheld ones actually. Like they got Fatal Fury on the Game Gear and Samurai Showdown on the Game Gear. They're actually quite good. Yeah, Samurai Showdown's on the Game Gear.
Oh wow!
It's actually really good. And Fatal Fury Special is on the Game Gear as well. But I can't think of a good handheld one-on-one fighting game. Really, I guess probably Mortal Kombat 2 for the best one.
That IK Plus, did that come out on?
You might have done on the Game Boy.
That
actually.
might have been.
That would have been a good one. Yeah,
that might have been okay.
Yeah,
but nothing springs to mind.
They just couldn't really handle a Street Fighter sort of type setup.
But I was just sort of laughed about that time. You had the Game Boy, which had a really poor little green screen, but amazingly good games.
And battery life.
And then battery life was, I remember, 18 hours. And, as a kid, you seemed to go through that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then you had two other consoles at the same time. You had, obviously, the Game Gear, which we slightly talked about already, and you had the Atari Lynx. Now, the Atari Lynx was it was built the same sort of type of architecture as the Amiga.
Yeah.
Lots of similar type of chips in there.
Same couple of engineers, R.J. Michael and Dave Needle.
I didn't know the names, but yeah.
They helped create the Amiga, yeah.
And so to me, the Atari Lynx and the Game Gear were like, oh wow, these colour screen. The games were. I almost want to say they're not quite as good.
My favourite out of all the handhelds
thought?
is probably the Game Gear. That was when I got a Game Boy and then I played a mate's Game Gear. I was like, this crap's all over my Game Boy. Obviously, nowadays you'll be like, well, the screen was really blurry and crap and the batteries were terrible. But to be honest, I wasn't constantly out with my Game Boy, so that wasn't a big deal. I probably played it way more indoors. I sat on the sofa or in my bedroom, probably plugged into a power supply, than I did out. So the idea of me having to be tethered to a power supply with a Game Gear didn't bother me at all. But I remember playing my mate's Game Gear and playing like Sonic the Hedgehog and Outrun and Wonderboy. Games like that on it, and I thought, yeah, this is the one that I want now. This is awesome. Yeah. And that was probably the first SEGA console that I thought was awesome. Basically, because the games looked like what I play on the telly.
Yeah,
that was the reason why.
It was the same, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, and it wasn't more expensive. I mean, the Game Boy was £70, I think, with Tetris.
Yeah, $69.99. I think that was the
yeah. But
that was really what made the Game Boy so successful was Tetris.
It was that pack.
It was everyone wanted it, and it was like, oh yeah, I want to get the Tetris machine.
Yeah,
that's what people said, and they just played it. And the times I've been to people's houses,
you've been to a lot of people's houses.
I've been to people's houses, and you go into someone's toilet, and there's a Game Boy.
Go on.
There's a Game
this is
Boy.
getting interesting.
There's a Game Boy there with Tetris, and that has happened. I've seen that maybe 2 or 3 times, and you see memes that go around the internet of people just. That's what they just use, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
having to sit down.
And it also appealed to on being businessmen on the train and all that stuff because it was just a perfect sort of commuter thing. But yeah, the Game Gear, I mean, that was about, I think it was £99 for the base pack. I think that you might not have even got a game with that. I think that was just the Game Gear. I think you paid about 20 quid more, you got columns or something, wasn't it? Yeah. Obviously, the battery life was terrible because of the backlight. But you could play it anywhere, really, well, not outside so much, but anywhere where there was some shade or indoors, you were absolutely golden. And at night, you could play it as well with no issues, which was amazing. And it was just the sort of games that I was into then, like Sonic, obviously the Sonic, basically all the SEGA franchises. It got a really good library. When you compare it to the Lynx, which I also liked, I had an Atari Lynx a couple of years. I think I remember I got an Atari Lynx about 1994 when we've talked about this place before on the podcast. Special Reserve, the sort of video game mail order club thing that was based in Chelmsford. Do you remember that? Were you
I remember their adverts.
Yeah, you got the adverts. Yeah,
and you'd always sort of look at them, but back in those days, I never purchased anything mail order or online because I don't know how would I send a check
Well, that's what we used to do. I mean, it was so that
Yeah.
that was it. The Special Reserve had really good. They had the best prices because they were mail order, so way cheaper than your Woolworths or anything in your high street. So I signed up to it, and you had to pay like a yearly subscription. You got a little magazine that was really just so they could sell you more games, but they did have reviews and editorial sort of stuff in it, which is kind of cool. But I signed up to it, and at one point, I think at some point in 1994. I think I don't know. The owner obviously had a lot of good connections, probably. Hence, he's able to run a shop, so he was good at getting stock. I think he just managed to get a couple of pallets of Atari Lynx 2s, and he just started selling them for £30.
Really?
And I was like, that's amazing, because only about a year earlier they were about £100. They were marginally cheaper than the Game Gear generally. I think they're about £100 with like a game. Normally, Batman Returns was the one that I always seem to see. But yeah, they started flogging them for like £30, and he got a bundle of games as well. He had about a dozen or so games that he obviously, again, this is another sort of, probably got it in an auction or something from a warehouse. And he started selling those for like, £10, £12 each. And you think how much some of those Lynx games go for now. I mean, to get a complete, fully working Lynx now, it'd be about £80 probably, I'd say.
Again, I don't know. When I was years ago, I worked a game, probably 2001 or 2000 when I was at university, and they had a small little retro section, and they actually had Atari Jaguars. Obviously, it's not portable. They had Atari Lynxes in there for I think a sort of similar price.
It must have been liquidating. Someone was liquidating the stock.
So they just bought them, and I remember one week I think they started off at $49.99. Then the next week they were $39.99. Then they were $29.99, and then I can't remember what I bought one at, but they're all boxed up, and there was loads of games. And
I mean, this is a point when like anything like 8 or 16-bit around 2000, you couldn't give them away.
No, exactly,
because there wasn't the nostalgia built up at that point. But yeah, I remember I managed to persuade my dad to get me a Lynx because they were £30, and I got it with Batman Returns, which is actually not a bad game, very hard. I managed to, over the years, cobble together some games for that. It's a mixed bag on the Lynx. Like Blue Lightning is a really good game, like a really good Afterburner clone, but it's probably actually a bit better than Afterburner. It's a lot slower pace, and there's just more to do. But it's got really good sprite. The Lynx had amazing hardware. It could do like sprite scaling, like
almost do sort of 3D. Because I had a flight sim game. Some sort of...
There was Warbirds was one.
Maybe that was
it. Like a dogfighting type game, yeah.
And that sort of... You flying around sort of a 3D world.
Had like polygon-like graphics and all that stuff.
Exactly, that was very impressive.
Yeah, and you had like... There were some games that there was Steel Talons, which is like you fly a helicopter around a terrain. That used polygons as well. A Game Gear and a Game Boy could not do anything like that.
No.
The only thing was the screen was extremely blocky because the resolution was lower, I think, than the Game Gear and the Game Boy. Not that they were high in the like anyway. But yeah, so it was a really good handheld. Techno or Electro Cop, that was a good game as well. Had a really good Double Dragon on it.
I used to like Gauntlet.
Gauntlet was good on it as well. You had to hold it like vertically, the console, to play it, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it was. I mean, at that price, it was a steal, but. It only had about 70 games because they just couldn't get the third-party support.
No. But it was generally a much better machine than what the Game Boy was.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the next level of... So obviously all these have come out. See, again, you went on to, what I want to say, 16-bit.
Well, there's one we're forgetting.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
We know that one. We talked about it a lot already, so we probably shouldn't go into it too much now, but obviously there was the TurboExpress.
Yes.
Which actually came out in 1990, so right at the beginning of this kind of period.
That was never really had any sort of impact in the UK.
Not even in the US, I think. Well, what it is for anybody, go back and listen to our TurboGrafx/PC Engine 101 episode. But basically, it was the PC Engine was a console made by NEC, had a really great library of games in Japan. Got brought over to the US as the TurboGrafx, and we got it as well as the TurboGrafx in a weird, very limited release.
Yeah.
But it was widely released in the States. But they managed to make a handheld version of it, And what was cool was it was just the TurboGrafx. It wasn't like a separate system that had its own library of games. It was the same console. So if you had a TurboGrafx already and you were lucky enough to buy a Express, you could take the game out of your TurboGrafx, place it in your TurboExpress, and just take it away and play it on the go for about 2 hours before the batteries died. But it had a really amazing screen as well. It had an active matrix screen. So it had none of the blurring issues that the Game Gear has. It even looks good now. There's no real big thing of modding the screen for the TurboExpress because the screen was already quite good. They do suffer from bad capacitors, but that's a different story. But yeah, it was like about 300 quid because it was literally... And the PC Engine was basically a sort of Mega Drive level console, really, wasn't it? It was 16... Well, it was 8-bit, wasn't it? But it had really good graphics.
Sort of 16-bit graphics, 8-bit processors, or something like that. It was a combination of the two, but it certainly looked better than the NES, and I think maybe the Master System as well to a certain extent.
I would say it was very close to the Mega Drive. You know, it could do some things that the Mega Drive couldn't do. It had more colours, and but the thing that I always used to remember about it, seeing it on TV on shows like Bad Influence, and reading about it in CVG magazine, because they're the only ones. There was no internet for us in those days. We'd only read about these consoles in the magazines and on TV if they ever showed it. It was the only handheld that could play Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
Because the PC Engine had a really good version of Street Fighter 2. So you could play Street Fighter 2 on a handheld, which blew my mind.
Exactly, and that was a good version as well.
It was a really good version. So as much as you were saying there was this weird Game Boy version of Street Fighter 2 that came out, years later... The Turbo Express, you could play a really good Street Fighter 2 on there. But that was like, it was. I think everyone sort of called it like the Rolls Royce of handhelds. We go into it in more detail in the TurboGrafx episode, so watch that. But yeah, that was another kind of one. But it probably sold like maybe 1 million units in total. So way, way, way behind even the Game Gear.
Way behind, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the next level really, it was the Game Boy was. Given a little bit more of life by making it the Game Boy. Well, you had the Game Boy Pocket when they made it smaller.
It was a weird period, wasn't it? It was like there wasn't really an immediate upgrade to 16-bit handhelds that we kind of all thought would happen.
No, there was. So it went to the Game Boy Pocket, then the Game Boy Color, then also I know you've picked up a Nomad.
Yes, yeah, that's another weird and wonderful one. So yeah, there was this weird time where. I think because we saw like the consoles were making a jump up to the new consoles, like from Mega Drive and Super Nintendo to Sega Saturn and like PlayStation. So we thought, oh, we've got these handhelds that have been around for the last few years, Game Boy and Game Gear. Surely they're making new ones of these, I guess, that will be as good as like the Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo. But there wasn't really, because the Game Boy just basically destroyed everybody. No one wanted to risk bringing out a new one, but. In a weird, only really Sega would have had the balls to do this stuff because they just pushed out any old thing that they could really cobble together in the R&D lab. They made a handheld Mega Drive. So do you know what do you know about this thing?
Well, obviously it's called the Nomad.
Yes.
The Mega Drive, it's got 6 buttons on there, a screen.
Have you played one?
I have actually. Yes, we one or two coming to the shop years ago.
Yeah.
But I think it came out of, because in Japan they had the Mega Jet.
Yes.
So I think...
What's that?
That was basically a Mega Drive where you just held it in your hand and played the games, but it plugged into a screen on a...
You held the entire Mega Drive console in a smaller unit in your hand.
Yeah.
The controls are on it, yeah.
So I reckon they knew, because obviously they made the Game Gear in the past... And then they made this Mega Jet.
Let's just pop a screen on it.
Let's just pop a screen on that, change the, make it a little bit more boxy. But I actually watched an interesting video a little while ago. I don't know if you saw this, Trev, but it was all about how the Nomad was the Switch 20 years before the Switch came out. Because it had TV out on it, you could put the game in there, and then you could plug in your controller, so you could be playing the game when you're out and about, and then basically plug it into your TV when you got home and carry on where you were.
Yeah, so
it's not quite the same, but
We mentioned already about the TurboExpress, where that took the same games as the main TV-based unit, but you couldn't plug that into the TV. No. So you can't quite say it's the same as a Switch. It was probably the very first console that could do anything like the Switch could do.
Yeah.
But the Nomad really could. Like you said, you could plug it into the TV. I always wanted one. I think I remember reading about it in the first issue of Sega Saturn magazine, like literally issue 1 of that. And it was weird because it was in a really tiny little footnote in like the bottom corner of the news page or something. And it said, "Oh yeah, Sega are bringing out a handheld Mega Drive in the States called the Nomad. That's kind of cool." I was like, "Well, that's amazing! You should be doing like a 6-page feature on that."
But I just think it was then everyone wanted to play Sega Rally, Virtua Fighting, Ridge Racer, something like a portable version of that, and it's going to be how much? No,
it was like $300, wasn't it, or something? Yeah,
it was just too late, too expensive.
I mean, it's quite big as well. It's actually slightly thicker than a Game Gear.
It was quite big. It
takes six batteries in this thing that you have to whack onto the back, like a battery pack. And they last about 5 or 6 hours. And again, the screen is a minor improvement over the Game Gears. Obviously, about 5 years had passed.
Yeah.
But it still has a lot of the ghosting and blurriness. So again, there is a mod floating around for it if you're that way inclined. But yeah, I mean, I picked one up recently. I found a good deal on one in good condition, and it is really cool. As someone who obviously grew up with these things, as we both have, we probably have a bit more of a tolerance for slightly naff screens and big sizes because we were happy as kids for these bulky consoles. And I really like the Mega Drive, so to be able to play it away. Okay, there's like Games, little handheld Mega Drives, isn't there?
Don't touch them.
Yeah, and there's I could get a small laptop and put RetroArch on it and play Mega Drive, but there's something about a real bit of Sega hardware. You could just whack the cartridge in, and it works with an EverDrive. So I've got a Mega EverDrive. I can bung that in there, and it works. And I've got every Mega Drive game just right there. It's got the 6 buttons, as you say, so there's no issues with Street Fighter 2. You can just play that. When you think all the games
fits in your pocket.
If you got if you're MC Hammer wearing massive parachute
bloomers,
yeah, you might struggle even then. Yeah, it wouldn't be something you would ever. It would be something like it'd be in a backpack, with some kind of huge
suitcase.
Yeah,
a big trunk,
a caravan. But it's cool. It's really cool, and it plugs into the TV. So in theory, if you could take it to a mate's house, and as long as you have the cable with you and an extra controller, it might be a slightly more practical thing to take, than an actual, full-size Mega Drive.
Yeah, just about.
But in saying that, player 1 has to stick to the screen. In fact, you both have to play off the screen if you haven't got a TV. But if you have got a TV, someone's obviously got to hold the actual Nomad as the first controller.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah, because there's only one.
There's only one controller port, so you go, and if you get pissed off, what's to stop you yanking the controller out?
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a funny one. But the funny thing is, the Game Gear is kind of the same principle because that was basically a Master System shrunk into a portable form factor.
But obviously it couldn't play Master System games, but it could play its own variant of them. But I think the next...
Oh, it could. You could play Master System games on the Game Gear.
Oh, of course you could.
Remember the converter?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could get a little device you could plug into the cartridge slot that could take Master System games. But it was a bit weird because obviously the screen would shrink everything down. Because it was the Master System games were designed for a TV, so there's lots of Phantasy Star or something. You'd really struggle with all the text. So that was a little bit like that. But yeah, so that was kind of a side thing that went on for about a year before Sega basically pulled the plug on it.
Yeah, but I say the next thing that I really got excited about was when the Game Boy Advance came out.
Well, there was the colour though. We can't forget that. In '98, I wasn't that excited by that when it was announced.
I did have one. I remember I played it a lot when I went on holiday once to Spain, and I brought a multi-cart for it, and that was great. But the colour was
everyone got those multi-carts from Spain, wasn't it?
They're brilliant.
It's so prevalent.
Mine had 8 million games on it.
Yeah, I think 7.9 of those million were Mario Land 1. Or Mario Man, Star Man, Land Man, with all different names. Yeah.
So I was a bit jealous because I had the 8 million in one game, but my mate had the 9 million in one.
Really?
So he had a million more games than me.
And he got a million more Mario, different name things.
Yeah.
Lucky him.
So that was good for him. but that to me it took me like, oh, it's just the same, but they've sort of given it a few colours.
I was really confused by it, to be honest, because
it was odd.
Yeah, because I thought surely they're going to bring out a colour Game Boy. I mean, we're in the late 90s at this point.
Yeah.
TFT, screens, which are the screens that basically were the basis of what we have now.
It was the same, but it was still not as good as the Game Gear or the Atari Lynx or.
Screen wasn't backlit still, so you couldn't play it in the dark or anything.
So I was actually.
Still 8-bit. It wasn't like a 16-bit console or anything. It was. Well, I was. Nothing appealed to me about it at all.
It sold like 1 billion units.
Yeah, I mean, it carried on the Game Boy, the 8-bit Game Boy line until the early 2000s, really.
Yeah.
But then also we had the Neo Geo Pocket. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That was around the same time, wasn't it? Or about a year 99-ish?
A year or two later.
I think 99,
I can't remember all the dates. You're better with those than me. But that was a brilliant little machine.
Yes.
I had one of those, and I used to love the clicky sort of joystick on there.
Like a Neo Geo CD pad,
exactly.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was it was like a sort of a Game Gear shape, but about a third of the size. It was quite small. And considering like how niche SNK is with the Neo Geos, they really tried to push this handheld as a mainstream kind of thing. And you got really cool like ports of like metal. So it was 16-bit, wasn't it? So it was genuinely a step up. The games looked kind of primitive because the screen was still black and white in the first release.
Yeah, I had the colour one, and it wasn't just because they said the Game Boy Advance. That was.
That wasn't for a couple more years, I think, though.
That was streets ahead.
Yeah.
But at that point you had that, and I remember I had Sonic for it, and that
there was a Sonic game, that Pocket Adventure.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah,
that was good. I had some sort of RPG called Dark Arena, maybe.
Yeah,
and I just did not know what to do.
Metal Slug had a really good Metal Slug.
Was good. There was 2 Metal Slugs on there, first and second mission.
King of the Fighters, there was like a Samurai Showdown, and they were genuinely good games.
It linked up with the Dreamcast as well, didn't
it? It did, yeah.
The
Sonic game could link up with Sonic Adventure. You could put do something like download a chow or something.
Yeah, couldn't really do much, but it did link up together. And another one, I don't know if you've ever owned this, was the Wonder Swan.
Yeah, that was around the same time as the Neo Geo. So actually, let's backtrack a little bit. So there was like a black and white Neo Geo Pocket.
Yeah.
I don't think we got that though.
I've never seen one.
Yeah, which was like a Game Boy. It was still like the same specs as the later one, 16-bit, and all that sort of cool stuff that the Game Boy didn't have. And you could play most of the library, but literally a year later they released a colour version, and most of the games are colour. That was the one that we got over here in the UK, and it sold fairly well. I mean, I saw lots of Neo Geo Pocket colours in like game stations and places like that. They really it wasn't that expensive. It was about £100.
Yeah, it was.
I think not even that. About 80.
Good little machine. Yeah.
Good little machine. I didn't have any issues with battery life.
No.
The screen wasn't backlit again. But again, I guess probably to the benefit of the battery life. But yeah, it was a cool little machine.
Yeah, you understood why, didn't you? If you wanted 10 hours of gameplay,
you
can't have
a
battery.
Screen.
Yeah, exactly. And
but yes, the Wonder Swan.
The Wonder Swan. Now I was leading into my funny story. I remember I went to X Electrical in Kingston when I was a student, and I saw in there they had a Wonder Swan.
I've never played one.
No.
I want to try it.
I don't think I have either.
No.
So I went in there and I was like, wow, you got a Wonder Swan.
I always thought what a weird name it had.
I'd buy that.
Yeah.
And so I was really sort of excited about it. And so I think I traded in a few things and, got all the money together, went down and bought it. And they had one game with it, had all Japanese writing on it. I was like, oh yeah, I'll have that one game with it and the console. I think it cost me 50, 60 quid. Got it home. plug it in. It was a black and white version. So it wasn't in the colour or the crystal one.
Again with the black and white late 90s handhelds, yeah.
Yeah, and I put the game in, and it was driving trains.
It's got weird library, isn't it?
It was just all it was just Japanese text, driving trains, and it wasn't like the Game Boy where you had a D-pad and you had the A and B button. You almost had sort of 3 D-pads.
It was like weird crosshatch thingies, wasn't it? They were in the corners.
Yeah. So there was loads of buttons, all in Japanese, and it was driving trains, and it was black and white. So I honestly must have persevered with it, but I had no clue.
I probably will get one at some point, but the game library, like the only game that I know that I'll definitely play is I know it's got a port of Golden Axe that's like really like basically identical to the Mega Drive. I'd probably play that on it. Yeah. I think there's a few other Sega games, like Mega Drive Sega games that got ported to it. But I think it's mostly like weird like dating sims and like really obscure RPGs. There's a couple of Final Fantasies on it though. I think there might have been
Fantasy
translated.
1 and 2, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a Resident Evil game or some kind of spin-off Resident Evil game, yeah. So it's kind of cool. I don't think there's any one-on-one for fighters. There's no like Street Fighters or anything on it, I don't think. But it was like a 16-bit handle. I think it was probably better than the Pocket Neo Geo. I think the main thing about it is it was designed by Gunpei Yokoi, wasn't it? Who invented the Game Boy. He left Nintendo in the mid-90s. Yeah, he made the Game Boy Pocket, which is actually the best Game Boy, original Game Boy in my opinion. And he left Nintendo, and he made the Wonder Swan for Bandai.
I think with the Wonder Swan in Japan, they went down the route of, this is a console for Japan. It's for Japanese people who like a slightly different game than people in the West. I think that's fair to say. And we're making it for them. We're not going to sell it anywhere else. We're not going to westernise it. That's what we're going to make it for.
It's like what Sega did with the Nomad. They were like, the Japanese hate us.
Yeah.
They hate the Mega Drive, but you Americans, you bloody love it. So we're going to make you a really expensive little handheld that's just for you guys.
Yeah.
We're going to lock out. We're going to lock out the Japanese games and the European ones.
Oh, they actually locked out.
Yeah, it's weird. So basically, anything before 91 will play,
and
anything after 94.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, because that's when, in that middle period, is when Sega had really good copy protection on their games. TMSS, I think it's called. Trademark Security System, yeah, that's it. So, if you've got an EverDrive, it's irrelevant because you're bypassing that. But they're a little bit... And you can't play Master System games on it. You can mod it to do it. Not even ROMs. Obviously, I've got the EverDrive, so I can think, great, I can play Master System. You can't. They won't work. You've got to mod it. I think it's something to do with like the Z80 that's in the Mega Drive. Doesn't talk to the cartridge port on the Nomad or something, which the Mega Drive, the actual Mega Drive, it does. Hence why you can play. Anyway, that's another thing. Yeah, the Wonder Swan was weird. I want to pick one up, but I don't think they're rare or valuable, really.
No, honestly, I reckon if you
70 quid or something.
They're not a huge amount. You can probably get a few good games for it still.
That's the thing, I just don't know what I'd play on it. Just Golden Axe. I think it's worth it for that. I could play that on about 50 other things.
I mean, it is. Well, the good thing, I'm looking at your iPhone next to the laptop there. It's about that big.
I've never actually seen one.
It's generally a really small machine.
Yeah.
And I remember the black and white one I had. Guess how many batteries it took?
A couple of AA's?
No, I think it took one.
Really?
One battery.
And that got you what, like 12 hours or something?
Yeah. I'm double checking.
There's about 4 different types though, isn't there? There's just the original, which is just a black and white one. Then there's like the colour one, which looks the same as the original, but it's got a colour screen. Again, it isn't backlit. And I think there's like a couple, like the Swan Crystal or something.
Yeah.
I think one of them might have a backlit screen.
Actually, yeah.
I think one of them.
I think the Crystal has
got a backlit screen. I think it's a bit of the naff one though. It's like front lit or something.
I think they had 3. They had the original black and white one. Then they had the colour one, which is the equivalent of like the Game Boy Colour.
Yeah.
Which was that type of thing. And then the Crystal, which let's say it was more similar to a Game Boy Advance.
I think when the Game Boy Advance came, I think it died like a death at that point because everyone just went berserk over the Game Boy Advance. Well, the Game Boy Advance,
I think we're slowly moving into that. When that came out, I bought that on day one.
Well, we can't jump to that yet, though, without mentioning the game.com.
Right, the Game Boy Advance. Right.
So again, with this
Right, this is game.com thing.
This weird thing. We've already kind of joked about the fact that we got to the late 90s and for some reason no one wanted to make.
Can't we say this for the
game.com
special?
That's a 3-hour marathon. We need to
Christmas special.
We need to foreshadow it right now. It's again about 97. We're getting to that point where we're all waiting for these amazing backlit sort of fully full color 16-bit handhelds that never really came. And we had another Tiger, who were pretty well established in video games.
The name of quality.
Yeah, I had a few of those LCD crap sort of single game liquid crystal, dot matrix, whatever they're not dot matrix. That's an actual proper screen, but screens, single character, whatever you want to call them. I had a Sonic the Hedgehog one. I tried more of those Konami ones that were sort of arrow-shaped Konami ones.
Oh, yeah, right.
Remember those?
Yeah.
I had a Bucky O'Hare one and a Top Gun one and a Star Trek one and a Gradius one. The Gradius one was really good. That's kind of an easy game to replicate on those sort of devices, though. I had loads of them. So those guys, Tiger, who made those, they made their own actual I use proper in very loosely, handheld, and on paper it sounded quite good. It could go on the internet, couldn't it?
Could it?
It could go on the internet in 1997. It had a modem. You had to jack it into the wall. Obviously, there was no Wi-Fi then. It wasn't until the iBook 2 years later. It had you could download I actually don't know what you use the calendar for. I think you could upload notes and download calendar stuff and do funny little basic. I think the idea was to maybe do online gaming as well with the built-in solitaire thing. But yeah, it was basically a sort of a Game Gear shaped. It was a bit taller and thinner, black and white. I think it was 16-bit, a really crap 16-bit processor.
But it had the same screen as the Game Boy, didn't it?
Basically. It might even be a bit worse.
The original Game Boy.
The original, yeah.
Yeah.
It's 8 years after the original Game Boy.
It was quite funny. It had the screen of the original Game Boy, but then all the games that came out for it, they did first Duke Nukem, first-person shooters were on there?
Yeah, they because they had the licenses to make games of what they made their little weird handheld single game things.
Yeah.
They thought, we can use those licenses to make actual games for our Gamecom.com, if you want to call it. So yeah, you had like you said, there was a weird Duke Nukem port. You had Mortal Kombat Trilogy, which is horrendous, Fighters Megamix.
Yeah.
Indy 500, these weird Sega arcade games.
Is it Resident Evil?
Resident Evil 2, yeah. And it was just... It was a really weird, I don't know who... I think they had their own in-house programming team that had no experience making actual games. So you got these absolutely butchered versions of games that were popular on the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation at the time, and some Sega games. Sega Saturn games. And I think it sold for about £100. The screen was even probably worse than the Game Boys at the time. It had a really bad, even worse refresh rate. Wasn't backlit again. And I think it basically tanked. I think it got two versions of it. There was a smaller version of it as well.
Do you know anyone that ever owned one?
No. It came out in the UK though. It did come out in the UK. I don't know, about 16 games, maybe not even that, I think.
Yeah.
Didn't you have to open it up to put a game in or something? It had a weird cartridge thing.
Oh, you're reminding me.
We're getting into something else there.
You're reminding me of something now,
aren't we?
Yeah.
But we have to get to the Game Boy Advance.
Right, the Game Boy.
Yeah.
I think the last two we'll talk about is the Game Boy Advance and the N-Gage.
Yes. The N-Gage is one we really want to talk about, but we'll start off with the...
We'll start off with the Game Boy Advance. Now I brought that on day one when it came out. I got F-Zero.
Was it 2000 or 2001? March 2001, I think.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And I got F-Zero with it. I got myself a little battery rechargeable pack. And I thought it was absolutely... It was really good.
I wasn't again. I don't know why I had such high standards for handhelds, but I first played one. A mate of mine got one, and the first game I played was Super Mario World because they just ported a load of Super Nintendo games.
Well, they did cool. Super Mario World. No, Super Mario Advance was Mario 2.
And even at the time, I was like, why don't they just port Super Mario All Stars? And straight away, you got all the Mario. No, they want to milk £30 out of you per game.
Well, someone said something interesting the other day was. On the Game Boy Advance, it sold millions and millions of units, but they never brought out a a Mario 2D game for it.
Like its own unique
like its
one.
own one. They never did that.
There was, I think, maybe Paper Mario, which is not really the main line Mario series.
I don't think that was on.
Yeah.
On that, they had the RPG ones, the Mario and Luigi.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Paper Mario, Mario and Luigi.
Yeah. That sort of.
But not the main line Mario Brothers.
No, but why didn't they ever bring out?
Mario World 3.
Mario World 3.
Yeah.
Or...
Which we still haven't got, really. I guess you say New Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah,
still not.
Sort of other routes,
I guess it doesn't really... Well, I suppose Mario World 3 is Mario 64? Is that the main line? That is, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah, which I suppose Odyssey is the most recent game in that series. I don't know what is considered the actual Mario mainline thing these days. But anyway... I played like Mario Advance, like maybe 2 was the Mario World one, or 3. And I thought, this is cool, but I didn't like the fact it didn't have a backlit screen.
That was a miss trick there, didn't
it? It was really hard to see. I guess we had laptops at this point that had really good screens and things like that. And honestly, my Game Gear had a backlit screen, 7 odd years before. So I was always baffled by that. And for me, the Game Boy Advance didn't really start until they released the SP. But was it a year later or a couple of years later?
A year later. And I remember, again, I went out on day one. I think I traded in my Game Boy Advance and I got an SP.
I mean, that's what they should have been brought out in the first place.
And that to me was like, this is what they should have done in the first place. I love the clamshell.
It literally had the promise of putting it in your pocket, because it was, if you fold it up like a laptop, and it could fit in the smallest pocket you could possibly find.
Yeah, it's a great little form factor.
Batteries built in, you don't have to buy batteries anymore.
Yeah, it was. They just got everything right with that one. They really did.
And you had a light on the screen.
Yeah.
It wasn't brilliant. Well, say that it was a front light, wasn't it? It wasn't a back light.
Yeah. So it was like a sort of a light around the edge. Okay, that was a little bit of a cost-cutting measure.
But you could play it in the dark.
The point was you could play it in the dark.
Yeah.
And then I never knew the difference until later on. Go, actually, backlit's much better.
Neither did I, and it wasn't. I didn't even know. But what we're getting at is there was a yet another upgraded version of the Game Boy Advance. It was the SP. Obviously, it was this one, the clamshell one, that came out right at the end of its life. I think in 2005. That had a backlit screen. Looks exactly the same. You'll be able to tell really until you turned it on. But it had a backlit screen. You got a really crisp. Finally, in a Game Boy, you got a perfectly crisp, clear screen that you could play anywhere really, maybe even outdoors. It's the AGS 101. In fact, you can go way into the very beginning of Console Shock when we did a video show where we covered the Game Boy Advance, and that was perfect because you had the ultimate Game Boy really then, didn't you? It could play. It was backwards compatible, of course, all the way to the original 1989 DMG Game Boy. You could do Game Boy Color, all with a backlit screen, so all the games looked amazing. In this perfect form factor, and then you went to the last hurrah of the original Game Boy was the Micro. Did you ever play a Micro?
I did. I had one at one point, and that was an amazing machine. And I'll tell you a funny story about it. I had one.
I think they're great. I love them.
And I remember I had them in my pockets of my jeans, and they went through the wash. And went through a hot wash.
That's how small they are. They were literally micro.
Exactly. Yeah. So it went into the wash, came out, and it'd been washed and dried, but it was off. And the actual game, I remember I had Tekken for it. That came out, and the cartridge was warped because of the heat.
Yeah.
But the Game Boy, it was bone dry because it had been washed and then dried.
Yeah.
So it came out there. But I put another game in. Oh God! I ruined it. Worked straight away.
And it still works.
Worked straight away.
It's amazing.
All through the wash and everything. So yeah, absolutely phenomenal.
I mean, the great thing for that because they obviously brought ports of Doom out for the Game Boy Advance. Yeah. So to see that on an absolutely tiny Game Boy Micro, which is not much bigger than a stick of gum.
It's a small screen, but it's good quality.
It was really, it had a really good bright backlit screen, like the SPs, but really small. But just about the smallest you could possibly have a screen before it becomes difficult to play.
Yeah,
it was fine to play, but it was about as small as you'd want to get really. But it was really, really small, and it literally even smaller than an SP, fit in your pocket again, your front pocket in your shirt, no problem at all. But yeah, playing Doom on that. I mean, this was a game that 6-7 years previously would cost £1,000 on a hulking grey tower PC. To play that on a tiny handheld that could fit in your front pocket on your shirt was amazing. But it came out in a weird time because at that, we're not going to sort of jump into. We need another part to this.
Exactly.
Show when we sort of hit the PSP and the DS.
It was out. I mean, at the same time, I remember on the shelves in the shop.
Came out after the DS, I think. Actually,
I think
like a few months.
You had the DS or you had the Micro, and in all honesty, why on earth would you have bought a Micro?
Yeah,
because the DS can play the Game Boy Advance games and the DS games.
And it was about the same price, I think.
It was about the same price.
Yeah.
So it was a great machine.
Didn't work with original Game Boy games as well, which is a little bit of a bummer, but yeah.
But it was generally a great machine. But who in their right mind would have bought one? There's no real reason to buy one. But it was a really good machine.
Talking of who in their right mind would want to buy one,
the
Nokia N-Gage.
Oh, man.
I mean, in terms of like graphical power, it was the first handheld system. Well, actually, there was a few weird, like, one-off ones, so maybe I can't say that. But probably mainstream one. Because there were things like there was the GP32. I remember one of them. That was a weird South Korean handheld that was really just for homebrew, made by a South Korean company called Game Park. I actually had one of them.
Yeah, I've seen one.
I had one of them at the time. There was an online like quirky video game sort of selling place called Lixang or Lixang.
Yeah, I remember that.
It sold like converters for like importing Mega Drive games and like reproduction games and like this GP32 thing. I had one of them. There was that came out about 2003. I could probably do some rudimentary sort of 3D sort of stuff. And there was the Tapwave Zodiac. Which is a really weird half PDA, because PDAs were getting quite popular in the early 2000s. That could do like a good version of Duke Nukem 3D and like some like 3D sort of Spy Hunter came out on it. There was like a Tomb Raider game as well that came out on it. But then the N-Gage was the first. I remember when I played one in game, they had a little kiosk set up because Nokia actually did try to push it. And I think I played like Pandemonium and Tomb Raider, and I thought, this is cool. It's like PlayStation graphics.
It had a really nice 16:9 screen.
yeah, the wrong way round.
Yeah, the wrong way round.
So you had the screen. It was a phone and a game console in one, which I guess is foreshadowing, iPhones and stuff, but in the crappiest way. So you could use it as a regular Nokia phone, with the legendary thing where the mic and the speaker were on the top edge of the system. So you had to hold it sideways to your face to use it, which looked ridiculous. But yeah, it had an actual... Yeah, so and the screen was portrait, like a mobile phone at the time, which is awful for playing games. But the screen itself was good quality, backlit and all that. It just was the wrong orientation.
Stuart is shaking his head.
But yeah, I mean, it had a proper like...
It had the same screens that the phones had.
Basically, yeah.
And that wasn't...
It was like a Nokia 6600, I think, is what the one it's closest to. But it had a proper like 3D graphics subsystem in it, so it could do basically PlayStation quality graphics, which was far in advance of what.
Wasn't there a Call of Duty game on there?
Yeah, it was like Skyrim, but there was an Elder Scrolls game, which is like worth £100 now if you can find it.
Oh wow!
It was like FIFA, like Madden. What else was there? Like Pandemonium, the PlayStation game. Yeah, so EA made games for it. Ubisoft, Activision. So they got a few people making games. The games just came on SD cards, didn't they? Or MMC cards, whatever. There were several different formats in those days. But I think separately to buy it was about £300, and I think you had to get a contract otherwise. So it never had a chance, really. And when you think, actually, I think only about a year later, like the DS come out and the PSP. Yeah. Also, when you got to the PSP, that utterly destroyed it in every possible way.
I mean, the DS.
Even the DS, in my opinion, I preferred the PSP. But it still holds up to this day. Again, that's another like episode. The PSP needs an episode on its own.
Yeah, exactly.
It's in my top 3 consoles of all time. The PSP. It's that good. But yeah, that's handhelds. And I think we've run the entire gamut of. 1989 to sort of 2004 there. I think we'll have to do a part 2 of this.
Definitely.
Up until the present day.
Yeah.
Because, well, I don't think we're going to have dedicated ones really anymore. It's just going to be whatever Nintendo bring out. Do you think Microsoft or Sony, or there's a last question to throw out, will Microsoft and Sony bring out a handheld again?
Do you know what? I'd love it if they did, because...
Would it be like a modular thing, like the Switch? It won't be just a separate unit?
I think they'll do something very innovative. But for me, I love playing the Switch, and I get so sick and tired of, oh God, here's a game for the Switch, but it's not as good as the Xbox. It's not as good as the PS4.
They say that though, but it's not like when you got a Game Boy version of a Super Nintendo game, where it was genuinely they had to make a completely different game. This is just the resolution is a bit lower, but the game is essentially the same game.
That's true, but I'm like, I mentioned earlier how I'm playing FIFA 18 on my Switch. Really enjoying it. But I want to get FIFA 20, but it's going to be the Legacy Edition, so they've almost stopped supporting that.
Yeah, so which is that is weird.
I would almost like an Xbox One portable.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that will be possible.
We can't be too far from stuffing the innards of a base Xbox One into something akin to the size of a Switch. I mean, when you think a low spec gaming laptop is not that much bigger than a Switch, and it blows a Switch away with an NVIDIA graphics card and all that sort of stuff in it.
Well, exactly.
And NVIDIA make tiny versions of their full blown graphics cards now. You don't even need a Tegra. You can get a GTX 1080. That's like the size of a credit card, but then you'd have a handheld that would be $1,000.
Yeah,
but Microsoft can make something like that. There'd be a very small market, but
I don't know. I think they're quite a big market. I think lots of people will be after that.
I'll be tempted.
I mean, I'll be tempted, but I'll buy all of that stuff. So yeah.
We'll have to wait and see. I suppose maybe we'll get one in the next few years.
I've got a feeling they won't.
Yeah, I think the Switch might have turned their heads a little bit, but it might be a bridge too far. But anyway,
well, actually, final last point before we tell you where we are, or where you can find us even.
Yes,
is I think for PlayStation and Xbox, the way they're going to do portable gaming is through the cloud.
Yeah.
So
exactly,
you play it on your phone. With a couple of joystick add-ons, or play it on your laptop, play it wherever you want, and I think that's the way they're going to do it. Yeah,
so obviously they would have to have some kind of a decent connection to the interwebs to be able to pick that up. But I think ultimately that'll be the solution. It won't be hardware. It'll talk to your Xbox at home, or then stream it to you, or it'll be some cloud. Google Stadia type thing, but not crap like Google Stadia.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's basically what we're going to get. Cool. Right. So that's basically it. We apologise for the awful audio quality. We're having to improvise today for this, but we're going to try and get a better solution in place before we do the next episode. Certainly, if we want to have any guests on, because we're not going to have much chance of inviting them down to see us every single time. And there's none of these people live in London that we like to watch on YouTube. So,
well, saying that, if you live in London and you've got a YouTube channel and you don't mind travelling to central London,
you're really famous.
And you're really famous, and you want to be on our podcast, please hit up our Twitter, which you can find at Console Shock.
I guess.
Twitter, Console Shock, or go to our Facebook page, Console Shock, or our website, consoleshock.net, or
where can we get
YouTube.
The podcast?
iTunes.
Stitcher. There's another one called Acast, isn't it? Is that something we should get on?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah? If it's free, you're not going to pay for any of that stuff. I've got a page, we haven't started e-begging yet, so...
No.
So yeah, thanks guys, and thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll sound better in the next one. But keep listening, and we'll speak to you again. We'll see you again soon. Bye.